Hi everyone, it's Rob Watson, the module leader for TECH1502 Introduction to Community Media. Happy Christmas, Happy New Year. Hope you had a nice time, hope you're feeling refreshed, you've done lots of reading, you've got on with some work over the break, and now you're ready to come back and sit through some lectures. This is the 12th lecture for our lecture series, so this is the halfway mark, the halfway point. And in this lecture, what we'll be talking about is some community media examples and principles. So kind of an overview, if you like, of some of the main issues that we need to think about as we go forward with in terms of what community media is. So we'll look at the idea of kind of what Ofcom produced a report a few years ago about internet citizens. We'll look at what is expected within that idea of citizenship, which is a core part of what community media addresses. We'll look at the idea of kind of localism and the debates around hyperlocalism and the idea that we are not well served by forms of mainstream commercial media that relate to our local identities, our local places of association. So the idea of citizens journalism, which isn't just undertaken by so-called professionals, is something that is increasingly important, and how do we tap into that and what do we understand from it? And this ties with the whole kind of set of debates which came forward with the rise of what's called Web 2.0 in terms of user-generated content. So those things that are produced on your phones, those things that are produced kind of by people independently and then shared and circulated online. So underpinning a lot of this is the idea of participation. And in which way and what form do people participate? Now, participation can either be a positive or a negative experience. There's no reason to suggest that it's unique by itself as being progressive and positive. It could be a negative experience. But we'll look at some examples of where we think maybe it is a positive experience. And our question is, I suppose, is how can we, when we engage in producing community media for our communities, maybe we should remember that media for communities is maybe a better title than community media. So we can look at some examples. So we'll look at community radio in a bit more detail. We'll look at some examples of how art-based practice, rather than just news or sport, we'll look at kind of issues of social identity. So we'll look at there's community radio stations around the country, Spark FM and Radio Free Brighton and things like that, and Hermitage FM over in Colville. And we'll also look at the idea of kind of community news and the idea of what communities do in order to be able to develop a sense of engagement with the issues that are relevant to the communities that they're part of. Importantly, I think we should also keep an eye on community filmmaking, because it's becoming ever easier to make films and share films as the bandwidth challenges and the compression data rates of video files and the video editing systems become ever more easy to use and apply. Are we going to see a massive increase in the way that we share films? I mean, Instagram stories is something I follow a lot of, and the amount of there's nothing complex. Snapchat. Are these community media sources in a kind of more unfiltered kind of a way? So we need to think about some of these issues and how they fit in with our sense of what social networks are and what drives a kind of sense of creative and sustainable applications for these forms of media. So we'll look at these in terms of kind of the type of organisations that we maybe need to develop, and it would be very useful for us to think about something that comes out from the community newspaper or community reports that you're going to be producing for your coursework. What will be the legacy of that? What is it that we're going to keep going that is going to be maintained? Should this just be a one-off, or is this something that we should all be engaged in creating and producing and finding funding for and sourcing and those kind of things in order for it to be able to become established and to become something which is distributed and is informative and useful across maybe the city of Leicester? There's certainly, I think, a need for it. So we kind of need to think about the issues about participation and sustainability, which will stand us in good stead to start thinking about this now for the work that we want to do in the second and the final year. So quite useful examples and case studies, but also some useful principles and ideas where we can think about what makes, why do we value what community media does. That's the kind of questions we want to ask. So, a lot to cover. The notes are up on the DMU Commons wiki. That's at wiki.our.dmu.ac.uk. Just visit the TECH1502 section and look for the lecture notes section, and you'll find them in there. Otherwise, I'll see you at the lecture on Monday. Cheers.